Hey Maya,
Hey Neil, how you doing?
how are you? How did you answer on that poll?
I said 9.
Yeah, and then why'd you give it a 9?
Well, my sci-fi that I wrote was all about 9, and it was a kind of a good question because it wasn't a good or bad. It was just what's my emotional, and I'm like, I've got all the feels, so it's 9.
Yeah. So speaking of the feels, a lot of people got the feels when I'm gonna go right to the big thing, but like Burning Man was just canceled as of like a few days ago. And do you see this as a crisis? Do you see this as an opportunity? What's your take about that announcement?
Opportunity, and I don't know about you, but like it was very apparent that Burning Man would be canceled. For me, it was even COVID is a respiratory disease. Thinking of going to the playa with a bunch of people who are just had their immunity and the respiratory attacked, not a good idea. I think it's the healthiest choice. I think it's a huge opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of this is going to be a hard time and very devastating and heartbreaking. And within it, there's such promise. And one of my biggest things that I hold on to is the break that nature has got from us. So think about, even we think that the playa is dead and, we just get to go back to it every year. Just that area getting a respite from us, the amazing wild animals. And we know that like Fly Ranch did a sustainability survey, and the amount of animals, fauna and flora that's out there is just remarkable. So all of them are getting a break from us. Less bunnies being run over by 70, 80,000 burners driving on the highway there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is an opportunity, and it's opportunity to also, as Marianne said it this just so powerfully, to understand that the event is part of what Burning Man is, but Burning Man is a global culture. So I haven't been back to the playa for a few years. It doesn't make me less of a burner.
Mhm.
uh, it's almost as a Jew. The fact that I'm not a practicing one doesn't make me less of a Jew. I'm part of this culture. I'm part of this, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to reinvent what does it mean to connect in deeper ways when we can't actually be together.
So what would you suggest for the people who maybe spend 6 months of the year putting all this creative energy, coming up with imaginative ideas and working together to manifest it in reality and have that be part of a city that other people experience? How can you see that energy being redirected towards their local communities?
So there's so much to do there. I know also, like, we can't not acknowledge that some people, this is their livelihood. So we want to see that with, as a community, we support them. We even help them with ideation, brainstorming, money, whatever we can do, because, one of the things that this culture is going to be defined by is how it deals with a crisis like this. And I think the opportunity is, we've got the smartest, most creative, most awesome collaborative people on the planet, um, who don't have somewhere to put that energy. And I totally agree with you. Like, the communities are needed. We know, one of the things that was so amazing about the emergent experience that I got to see from very far away, but notice after Katrina, after, Burning Man Katrina, during Katrina, and we were there, and we were getting all this like crazy news, right? Is the emergence of Burners Without Borders. And one of the big things that Borders did first was look at how to build community. So building community in these times, building networks, uh, teaching art, even if you have to do it remotely, creating some collaborative art piece that can only, I mean, think about it, if we can all make something very small in the house that is part of a bigger installation, that when we get to actually meet again, we can actually put it together. What does that look like? And we could do it in a neighborhood, or we each are allowed to come in and put that piece at a designated hour and just let it be built. Like, there's all these like fun ideas. But I really think beyond just the creative part, it's we need the hearts and minds to actually help with recreating our communities, reimagining what is this new normal that's going to happen, reimagining well-being, reimagining how we connect, reimagining What does it mean to thrive during these times? I think that's also how I'd love to see our community show up for each other.
What are examples you've seen about like this co-creative energy being manifested in, the real world, where people think, oh, these only magical, amazing co-creative things only happen at Burning Man, but where have you seen it applied as an example of it, a glimpse of how the future could be?
Yeah. Well, everything's online right now, but I'm actually a little bit like burned out on Zoom, but some of it is in a really good way. I gave an hour talk at Lucidity Festival on Saturday. So, and they reimagined the festival in that way and reimagined how to throw a party. I've danced. I had some of my favorite DJs in my living room projected. I'm an hour after this, I'm going to be moderating an AI expert from Toronto on from the EXO World Expo, that conference that's happening right now. I'm seeing people teaching each other. I've had dinners, I've had Passover dinners, and people are reimagining what can we do. And one of the things that I've found is, because we're all at home, even though I'm in the future, if we're all at home, we actually get to be more intimate. Even on yesterday, one of the plenaries, and it's like Peter Diamandis and Samil Ismail, and both of their kids showed up, and one of them had a squeaky toy, and it was like just that creativity and vulnerability I think that's the good that's coming out of this time. And that's something we can actually be creative about and be happy about and work to sustain long term. So that's kind of what I'm seeing with a lot of the creativity that's showing up. There is a lot of possibility within the confinement.
So you mentioned you wrote an article on regenerative leadership, regenerative entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. How do you see that being relevant to our times right now?
It was the most relevant it's ever been. So the kind of the in and out of a regenerative entrepreneur or leader, and it's kind of an encompassing model that actually brings within it everything from who you are as a leader to all the business models, supply chain, ways of running your business, ways of interaction. But at the core of it and at the outset of it, it's a circular model. It's sacred reciprocity. That's like the essence of this whole thing. And sacred reciprocity is a concept from Quechua and from Shipibo people, and also Eightfold Path. It's the correct ways of doing things with nature. It's Native American way, and that is what is needed right now. The leaders that we're actually looking up to right now are much more feminine leaders. My team at Lumen, we're talking about the held and accountable leader, the leader that actually holds you and is accountable to your well-being. And you're seeing that the countries that have actually had the best results mitigating the coronavirus were led by women, or more, let's call it feminine or creation leader, somebody that's about the community. The regenerative entrepreneur leader is all about that. They want to share the leadership. They want to support people finding their own purpose. They want to actually see that whatever they've done, they leave everything better than they found it. And we're actually seeing that. We're seeing Cuomo, we're seeing Newsom, Governor Newsom here, we're seeing Jacinda Ardern, we're seeing Merkel, we're seeing all these people show up, we're seeing London Breed in San Francisco, really stepping up to leadership. And then regenerative leader also looks at the whole system. So it's not only mitigating the specific pandemic, but what do we do after? How do we actually reimagine our cities, reimagine our food systems, reimagine our connection to nature? Because everything that's happening right now, this is basically the first biggest global hurt that we're getting because of the climate crisis. So it's completely connected. And it is that return to right relationship with nature and all systems. So it is the right moment for this kind of conversation. And I do not think it is radical in any ways. It's actually the correct conversation, and everything else is radical because it actually goes against healing us as a planet, as a society, as a people.
So you talk about regenerative leadership, and there's you talk about the collective journey. which is about, it's tied to, I guess, your science fiction writing,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of paints pictures of this imagined future. So if you could take this energy of like, Burning Man being canceled, people discovering regenerative leadership, you see a lot of return to a lot of the indigenous healing practices. And so you have to paint a picture of where this could all head. And there was a collective journey towards creating this imagined future that, reflects some of the values in your background there. Could you like paint a picture of what life would be like in that world?
Yeah, and I have extensively written about it. So in the story world that I created called Mtheory, there are 9 futures, probabilities of different timelines, going from different flavors of dystopia, utopia. But the time that I would love to lead us is a place that I called Topia. It's just a place, and it comes from the recognition that we all have a place in our heart that we miss, and we don't know that we miss it. And there was an art experiment that happened in the 70s where they asked people to um, paint something that is evocative of a memory of a place that they've never been to. And they all actually painted a very similar place, which was rolling hills and a path going through a field during around dusk. And these artists, I forget their names, but this was actually a pretty interesting kind of ethnographic research. I don't know if it's got real scientific backgrounds around it, but the metaphor that was coming through is that probably everybody's missing the savannah, because that's where we're all from, and we all have an image in our epigenetic DNA of where we want to go to, which is home, which is this beautiful place. So Topia is reminiscent of it, but it's also a Goldilocks space where both technology and kind of the permaculture regenerative movement can actually live together. It's very highly technological and beautiful, but because technology has helped us to reimagine the way we work, and because our society is actually all around well-being, our cities look different, and they look more like this background city behind me, where, if we don't need to have cars to move all around, then we don't need to have streets. If we don't have to have streets in the same way we had them before, then what do we do with that? I'm actually consulting or advising with one of the groups inside of the World Economic Forum, all around the future of mobility. And this is the question that we say, we ask, if we don't need to have the same modes of transportation, how do our cities look alike? And if the city comes from a place of, this is something we talked about in our creative communities, if the city comes, this is John Mark's question, like, what is it about the city that you love? And if love and beauty is what we actually infuse in our communities and our cities, that's the city that I want to build in the future. And that's what Topia is. It's got all of that. Everybody's fed, but technology makes everything easy. I can travel anywhere really fast if I use the Hyperloop, but otherwise I can create a pod from my nanotechnology power suit to move me around the city. And then wherever I want to, I can go and eat, because food is open, and there are buildings full of like people just coming and dining together. There's no work, but if I wanted to, like in Star Trek, if I wanted to become a Starfleet officer, yes, there's still a rigorous way of doing it, but that's my choice. I don't have to do it. I have UBI. I actually have beyond UBI. I have universal basic resources. So I can access anything. I can access the internet for free. I can get food. I can get housing for free. And then I can actually self-imagine what I want to be in the future of myself. And again, if I want to be a professor, there is still a way of doing it that is more rigorous. We're not taking the rigor away. We're not taking that tension, but we're not having it, the tension between warring factions. We're more having the awesome tension when we do very strong exercise and our bodies are like totally aching, and that tension is growth of muscles. That's healthy tension versus warring and that kind of grief and trauma. Even though I know that so much is going to come out of these times that is going to be, we don't want this, we want something new. And if we look over centuries, every time there was such a big collective trauma like this, the flip side of it is really positive things have showed up. Not every time, but usually that's a trajectory, and that's where I'm hopeful.
Well, what could you see, like, now, after this question, I'll like open it up to the group for any questions they want to have. And feel free to ask questions in the chat as well, in the chat screen. So that's semi right, reimagined city on a city scale. How do you see this? Maybe if we start to create these prototypes of what this life could be like, and I realize things like universal basic income are like policy driven, that's nationwide, but if you could imagine down to like a block or just a building, it's some things we're calling catalyst hubs, where people can be the change in which you see in the world on a block or building level. And as a kind of a prototype where, you almost kind of pretend if the whole city could be like this, but let's start with a building or block. How would you see that? What would you want to see co-created there?
So here's one of the houses from the Topia. Actually, it's a house that's actually a smart house, and it's built of organic nanotechnology. So it actually changes for the people that are in there. It learns them what their needs and wants are, but it's also on the outside of it. It grows most of its food. So you still will need to bring food from certain areas, but that would be kind of a very special occasion. You can grow everything in the city, and a lot of the kind of basic foods you can grow at home. The group is kind of a group living, but still every person can have their own area of living, and they can ask for their own way of sleeping and their own way of the look and feel of the place. But it is kind of an agreement between people who are inhabiting that area, kind of in a intentional community kind of way. So I would be seeing more of that. And in that way, a building or a house doesn't need to have personal kitchens, etc. Those are things that can be shared. So then there's also the ability to have shared dinners together and have celebrations every night. Like we're seeing more and more intentional communities doing that. And it is something that we're missing in the modern world, is the shared dinner. So I'm seeing more of that. And I'm kind of more of the when we need to centralize, that's great, but then we distribute. I love the idea of distributed systems, not decentralized, distributed, because then they actually have autonomy and empowerment within the group, but then they can make those happy agreements with the rest of the city. And actually, from my future, there are no nation states anymore. There are cities and bioregions, because that actually completely makes sense. And then there's agreements between other bioregions to bioregions. And then there's some global agreements. And the global agreements are around climate, everything around climate, and seeing that we have a healthy biosphere. That needs to be a global conversation with accountability for each area. And then well-being of humans, human rights, nature rights, and anything around mitigating income inequality. So if we could actually tackle that globally, and that's a global decision, and to see that every inhabitant of the planet has the same right, and inhabitant is not only human, then we can actually start moving towards the bioregion, because in bioregions, then there's specific things for the way nature is in that area, and topography and all that. So yeah.
Thanks. Oh, so Debbie has a question. Debbie, you can unmute yourself and ask the first question. And or if I can ask it.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Maya, what do you think the new normal will actually look like? Like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and then 5 years, 10 years. There's going to be the immediate coming out of this, and then what the world's response might actually be.
Yeah, so 6 months is still, we're still going to be in it. I just don't think we're going to be in it as we are now. I think we'll have more data. We're probably going to be already in testing of vaccinations. So I think in 6 months, we'll be relearning what we can actually do in the world, like what is being brought from the past, and what are the new business models, ways of congregating, what can we actually do? So that will be still like 6 months. 12 months from now, we'll be not back to normal, but we'll be back into something of movement. I think it's like right now it's so quiet and we're in this great pause. I think it will be more vibrant. We'll be very much knowing where we're at. I'm really hoping that we're starting to actually build together the new Green New Deal, etc. That's my hope for the future. In the United States, I really hope that the new cabinet is working really hard to both put in a new Marshall Plan and a new Green New Deal as fast as possible. And one of the big things that, and this is again, not just my vision, but just economics, like it is actually not profitable to dig oil anymore. So the transition into renewable energy is going to be much faster unless we're still with a warring president here. But if we're not, we're going to be moving there very fast. 18 months, I think by 18 months from now, I'm really hoping that we have a vaccine that is working globally. So that means like the whole globe has to work together to do that. This is very dicey. Like if we agree globally that we're all going to share it, that's the best case scenario. If we don't, that is cause for huge global unrest. But my belief is that, the death is real. One of the things this president cannot hide from is people are dying and suffering. You can't fake news that. And because of that, and because of what I'm seeing around, I'm seeing people actually saying, no, this is the truth. This is what we can build together. This is what the possibility for us to build as a community. And I'm seeing much more of that than even in San Francisco. Yeah, there's some idiots burning windows and things like that, but I'm seeing more people like at like huge amounts of percentages being kind to each other, supportive, loving, the amount of phone calls, the amount of connection. People are not going to forget that. That's visceral. And also people now know a couple of things. I know we can change really fast, so there's no more excuses. The sky is so blue and we all get to breathe. China gets to breathe, India gets to breathe. Everybody's going to say, what are we doing? And there's going to be a lot of social unrest and political unrest because of that. And it's going to come from us, the people, all of us different groups. And also we all learned what exponential is. So we understand what bad exponential growth is, and we're going to stop it. And we're going to know what's good exponential change. And we're going to go towards that. That's my real big hope in the next 18 months.
Just to follow up on that question, you're part of something called this pandemic resource team that you helped create as a way to apply, these principles that you're sharing into the current situation. Can you share a little bit more about how that's doing that?
Yeah, so this is, again, as I said, this is an ad hoc group. We're now fiscally sponsored, and we want to also spin up a L3C, which is basically a social enterprise. And what we want to see is that there is a healthy supply chain, medical supply chain, because one of the other things that is coming out is, there, as I said, there's always going to be people breaking the windows, and there's always going to be people who are going to be opportunists. They're much smaller amount of people doing that, but they create the most harm. So what we want to do is see to it that that there is due diligence in the supply chain. And even the now 6 of us, it started with 40, and it's actually very hard to run 40 people as a tight group. So one of my biggest learnings, and I've always known it, is crews work better than guilds. You can belong to a guild, but as a crew, you work faster and more nimble, especially during times that you have to move faster. So that's what we're doing. And we're actually, so crew is smaller.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, a crew is a part of a guild, so guild could be much bigger, where crews are smaller. 6 to 8 people is usually max. Maybe 12, but it's just harder at that point to kind of make decisions fast and really actually get things done. I don't know, this is my experience with running actually a couple of camps at Burning Man in the earlier days, but I think the biggest camp I ran was 67 people. There was always a core group of like 6 to 8 people who actually do everything, who come together to every meeting and get stuff done. And then everybody else is very willing to help, but they usually step up to help on the day of when you do packing, that'd be great. Build week, Exodus, whatever, right? They're really good at those things, but there is a group of people that just, really, really organizes everything. So even in distributed teams, etc. They're leaders or ladies, and they're people who step up to the plate. It's like, I think it's just human nature, and it's how do we empower more people to do that. But I kind of know this is also a very telling time to see who's crew, who's leader, and who's like love to help. Because actually most people are either in both camps right now. There's a few people who actually are hurting. There is a percentage of people that are hurting, and that's who we hold space for and support. But everybody that's healthy and has a roof over their heads and a plate of food on their table are either in what can I do to help, or how can I actually lead a team to do this? So it's actually really exciting to see.
So there's a rule, there's an adage called the 5-15-150 or 1-9-90. It's like one person or a few people to lead and some to follow, and then others to sort of form around that. And then, within the emerging, within the term emergence, which is a growing term now being used, that things happen organically, a higher order complexity arising out of chaos, reciprocal interactions, and self-organization, which Burning Man is a huge manifestation of. How do you see all those movements creating this new system of creation, and how do you see leaders emerging from that, and so how do you see what's your version of self-organization where leaders emerge and without being assigned, and how does that all happen, do you see?
I mean, that's the Burning Man concept. That's duocracy. If you see something that needs to get done, why aren't you out there doing it? And the great thing about Burning Man and the promise of Burning Man is a bunch of duocratic, awesome people doing that. And I think it is, not everybody's got that. It's something that is offered to everybody freely, and everybody has access to it, but not everybody has that calling, and it's okay. It's completely okay. But I think what is happening right now is we are actually, because we're home, we have more permission and actually more freedom to do something because we don't have to leave our home. So all the introverts are like, this is our time, this is great. We know how to handle being stuck at home. We can teach others. All the extroverts are like, I gotta do something. So they're gonna find something to do, right? So I think it is about inspiring duocracy and inspiring kind of just reaching out and doing it. But also I think inspiring, because it's not enough just to go out and do it and just be emergent, because yes, from chaos, emergence and all that, but then if there's no structure, because what happens if there's no structure, it dissipates. I mean, that's what happened in the universe. That's the Higgs boson. Higgs boson is all about mass. It basically created these superstructures and structures from complete chaos. And that's where, the people who have facilitation capabilities, who know how to hold space, who know how to create a container, that's their role. And the collective journey is not about a leader at the top. The collective journey is about shared accountability, shared leadership, and also creating containers where leaders and people who are not leaders can actually come and co-create together in a healthy relationship. So that's kind of the idea behind what I'm seeing. And these are structures. These are structures and distributed structures, but it is from chaos to eros. There is a structure there that is emergent. And as I said, without actually having a container, all this energy dissipates. Burning Man is a container. It's a pentagon container. It holds space for us to actually go completely wild. And there are 10 principles and rules of the game. So we have to create those structures. Otherwise, again, it's going to emerge and it's going to just dissipate.
That's great.
And it's very true for every time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I know I love the idea of the container for chaos. I mean, that really explains Burning Man quite a bit.
It is.
Debbie, did you want to ask your second question?
Sure. My second question was, Maya, how do your self-reliant and civic responsibility skills, which were maybe learned or at least honed at Burning Man, help you respond to the current world response to the virus?
I can definitely say that growing up in Israel, serving in the army, and going to Burning Man totally prepared me for this moment. It was, it's the coping mechanisms over time of things are really scary. What do you do? How do you actually self-regulate? Like in a very, there's a few other other pathways that's helped me through. You know, how do you manage when you're completely not okay, and actually have that self-regulation? So I think that's first thing. The duocracy part, it's like, it's really up to me, and that's where the Lorax actually very much helped me. Then unless you know, unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing's ever going to get done here. It's not. So there's other aspects beyond Burning Man, but it's all kind of the same. It's all the same people, right? It's like burners are people who revolved around the 60s trying to solve things as well. It's an evolution of the same people. We are all learning from experience, and learning from the people and experiences that brought us here before. So from before. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is something that brought me to this moment and supported me. We even kind of talk, and it's funny that at Lumen, my business partner there is also a burner. So, and we were talking about like all those things, all the kind of play. I sometimes call Burning Man the apocalyptic playground, where we get to like play. And it's funny that Wasteland came out of it. But literally, you know, we get to play with when things don't work and when things work amazingly all at the same time. You know, it's like, wow, that was the worst dust storm. I almost got a 4x2 in my head. And then 20 minutes later, the most beautiful rainbow, double rainbow, and we're all crying and hugging each other. I mean, that experience is very telling. And Israel also helps, because it's, you know, experiencing war and being in the army and knowing how to deal with pretty extreme attacks and extreme situations has definitely helped me as well.
Well, you can't have emergence without chaos. So that's, you know, that's
Yep.
a really good conditioning. Philia, do you had a question? You want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you for sharing. Very inspirational and beautiful things that are relevant and valuable. My question is, how can we co-create that future utopian vision together? And how can we get self-organized from a conceptual model and design into a reality, like using that open source duocracy? Like, where can we come together to work in this situation specifically, like online? And how can we read about it? How can we model? How can we iterate? How can we do? Where do you have any ideas there, or any visions, or any insights that you can share with us?
Yeah. So first, I'm seeing so much of that out there. So for me, it's also signal to noise right now. What is, you know, even with the PRT team, like, we're very aware. We've got like about a month to validate we can actually do what we want to do. You know, raise the money, validate some transactions, all those things. So we're very aware of that. So I think being aware of, you know, not only the wanting to do, but also thinking at, like, you know, that's why I love doing future casting, thinking where you're going to. So building with the end in sight first, like, how do you actually build from there backwards? And that's how, you know, how I run startups as well. It's like, what are you trying to build, and then bring it backwards, and then who are you going to work with? I think the self-organization is great, but even in self-organization, creating a structure that works for that entity is really important. And that just starts with really healthy agreements, you know, and alignment. And that, as I said, it needs to be good facilitators and good container creators. And if you know anything about Burning Man, most of their work is alignment and agreements with all the different stakeholders. I mean, Debbie can talk to it as well. It's like, it's mind-boggling, but it's all these stakeholders, etc. And even if we're emergent, there's ego, there's pain. There are moments here during these times that people are thinking from the amygdala, because it is actually, we're in a tragedy and we are in chaos and we are in trauma. So knowing that and working with people where they are at that moment, that's part of how we do this. So really focusing on the human factor here, because yeah, as I said, I'm seeing so much of this, and I've been, this past month feels like, I don't know, 5 years, build a new company, work with another company, ran a sprint, ran another, it's just like nuts. Like, I've never experienced something like that. But what I'm seeing that is the through line between all of this is creating containers, healthy agreements, what are we working on, and really assessing before we just run to emerge and create. Sometimes it works, most of the times it falls through. And I think the like Burning Man, you know, in 1996, it almost fell apart because it was completely emergent and it was completely open, and all of a sudden became too big, and all of a sudden it almost imploded. So it literally, there is science behind that. So as I said, there's just so much right now. In an hour, as I said, I'm joining the EXO World again. They're running a conference. There's conferences online. I think I would just say, what is moving you? What do you want to create specifically? What is your role? Understanding your identity. That's part of the leadership conversation, I think, also for each of us as leaders, because we're in the call here, we're leaders of some level, bigger level within our communities, is who do you want to be at the end of it? And then how do you serve others to become their best? And then how do you serve the planet? How do you serve the world?
How do you, how would you describe a good, say, pandemic resource team meeting, or, you know, where a self-organized meeting where it balances out top down versus bottom up, so it balances chaos and order. So you got, you know, so it's not one or the other, but it's not chaotic, but it's not too structured. What does a good meeting feel like? So
since we're all on Zooms all the time or other video conferences, actually not being online too much is better. Because when we're together, it's kind of feels more flow. But at Lumen, and I use it on the guys at PRT, that's Pandemic Resource Team. We have a very, 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 very simple model. It's connect, scan, focus, act. And the connect gives a time for everybody to just connect. It can be anything from like take 10 breaths together to what do you do on the weekend to one word check-in to anything else, but we keep it to like 2 to 3 minutes. So then we actually connect with the human there. We scan for what we're actually going to achieve on that call, because even if the call or the meeting is about complete big vision brainstorming, setting that up is an agreement between all of us. So that's what we're going to do. So if somebody comes in and they're like, no, I actually wanted to do work today, and you're coming and doing vision, and then we're completely not aligned, that breaks the energy. But if everybody is actually on the same page, this is what we're doing on today, we're going to go wild. And you're containing that is so good, because people, and then also kind of saying, we're going to do this for 2 hours, or giving people an in and out of how long you're going to actually having time boxes is really healthy. Because people actually can then regulate and self-regulate. Oh, I need to be here for 2 hours. I'm going to make myself ready for this. And then we focus, what do we actually are doing? And then the act is, so what is the follow-up from here? Because otherwise, if we're just meeting to meet, cool, that's dinner, or that's a cocktail, that's just, social. But if we're here to work together, let's actually see what's the follow-through afterwards and commit to that. Because that again is that held accountability. And without that, nothing moves. And I even saw it within this group. It was chaotic 2 weeks ago. And I was like, I'm always kind of like with startups. I'm like, do I stay? Do I go? Do I stay? Do I go? Because startups, they're chaos. But I said, I need to do a stand-up with you, otherwise it's not going to work. They all agreed. We're on a daily stand-up. We have a way of doing it. And it works. And as soon as I put that in, the creativity, the agreement, the alignment, the push forward started to move so much faster. It's kind of crazy how simple it is, yet if you don't do it, it's going to just create more chaos, especially during these times. I think, and it's also that agreement, as I said, creates psychological safety for people to create in. And the fact that I might be psychologically feeling safe all the time because I'm self-regulating and doing all these things doesn't mean that the rest of my team has it. So as somebody that's facilitating or is in kind of the leadership group, needs to create that psychological safety, so then everybody gets to show up with their brilliance, no matter who they are.
And notice you said you went over focus really quickly. Is it, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Or is there a reason why it seems to be the easiest part?
Yeah, because focus is like, what are we doing today? Like, and it could be 20,000 things, right? So this is a very if you are doing connect, scan is the agenda. The focus is now we're going to take 2 hours to brainstorm, or we're going to take 10 minutes to do this deck, or we're going to, it's what you're, it's the meat and potatoes of the meeting. So that could be just, I went over it fast because it just can go anyways, but as long as they're in alignment between everybody in the team, that's what you're doing, or group or collective, that's what you're doing for that agreed upon time, go for it. So yeah, that's why it's like, it's very open-ended.
Got it. Thanks. Johnny, you had a question. Yeah.
I have one, maybe leading to two if there's still time.
Yeah.
Maya, thank you so much. Some real brilliance. Really appreciating this. It's nourishing. Calling you guys from my bathtub. It's my new office.
Nice.
And so, it is an interesting time for us within Everland. I don't know if you heard or know anything about our project. 145 acres outside of Denver.
Yeah.
I know we talked, a lot of people there, don't want the assumption. And really, like, the heart is to create a place of permanence for a lot of the principles of Burning Man to be acted out on a continual basis. How that translates with decommodification and some of the impermanence or leave no trace has to be contextualized to the current container. But my heart has been to create an economic regenerative model that can fund new art and hold thought leaders and be a hub, a gathering space that we can heal and evolve and grow through. And we have had a fairly decent financial structure and raised several $100,000 just before for our first round of financing, just before all this hit. Now I should be in my second round of financing, and it's not a time to be fundraising. It's a time to be, calling in. And it's really beautiful as we get to drop in deep and be like, what is this supposed to be? And ultimately, Corona is going to massively shape the future of Everland. And more than ever, I have people calling and saying, we need this. This is so important. And the way it might be looking is, much more open. And for me, before there's the operating company that'll do events and that'll do retreats, but then there's this larger land ownership group, which I had bought it to be restructured with someone recently. And my friend who was going to buy it out and hold it is like, I need some more time. And there's that old model of one person owning the real estate and then the company renting it from, and it's just very top down. And something that's been coming up for us a lot lately is the co-op model and raising the capital to buy the land, because the community wants to own the land. And if then the co-op model, the co-owners, whether we do shares of, for instance, 1,000 shares at $3,000, and then every co-op owner gets use of the property in many more ways than a normal guest would have, use of the healing and wellness components, use of the art, special invitation. Like right now, as the burn is canceled, so many people are asking if we could do a burn right now. And I'm like, A, I have no idea if that's safe, so I can't answer that question. But B, if that is a question of when it's safe, having the co-op members, these owners, then be able to invite their tier of people out. So I'm just really diving in and trying to understand this more collaborative ownership model. I have no experience in co-ops. I'm asking people, but do you have any response or opinion as we do a large restructuring for what could be an anchor and a hub for a lot of Burning Man culture?
Yeah, I mean, I've never started a cooperative, but have read and thought, and some of the startups that I was looking at were even thinking about cooperatives. I think it's a really great model. One of my favorite grocery stores in San Francisco is a cooperative, and just a really healthy way. And it's also a way that's there right now. But the question is, what policy changes need to happen in regions to actually support this growing need of more collaborative land ownership and much more interesting ways of company lands, etc. I mean, we can own companies easier than we can co-own lands. It's actually kind of weird for me. That is not a great model yet, but I know that there's a lot of different groups that are working on that. I met some of the there's a intentional community federation or group that actually is looking into these different policies around how do you do shared land ownership. I know that a lot of my communities have been speaking about that. I know that Neil's got some information and opinions on it as well. So yeah, I think I'm all for it, and I love the idea of how do we share things? But also it's very interesting to say for how long, because somebody putting in $3,000 and all of a sudden using way too much, and then that affects somebody else. Like, how do you actually see that it really works for everybody? And maybe it's even we test for 5 years, and then you've got like when you actually raise money for any company, but moving from seed to A round, from A round to B round, there's a cliff, a place for you to actually jump in or jump out. So there's a lot of different ways of thinking through that.
But well, I guess it's still a different plane of a question. But like, I'm sure you read the book Stealing Fire, or you know the concept of the flow state, of being that in a place of selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and the richness of the senses. And the book, it states of it this being a $4 trillion economy, and that people are looking for that place of like pure bliss and joy. And a lot of that is what Burning Man creates, and people don't know how to describe that. But how would you go about describing that level of bliss and joy that people are seeking, and tying that into reimagining this future community, where a lot of times it's about, you hear about the technology behind it, but like how would you define it in terms of like these future communities are about creating these flow states where we are in this blissful state of being, and how would you actually describe it in that sense?
Yeah, and it's a return to our origin stories. I mean, don't believe that we're always being run over by tigers and large animals. Most of the times we're actually, especially in areas where there's abundant food, we were doing pretty well. And up until a couple thousand years ago, this whole scarcity and stress and war is a new concept. And states of flow is, I know the Jamie Wells book, but it's the Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi even looked at flow before that. So the big thing for me is nature. Nature and creativity is what actually also supports flow states. When we're in nature, we're in total flow. I mean, people are nicer when you meet them on a hike. And one of the most amazing things that is happening right now is nature coming back to the city and people having the experience. And I just don't believe that people are going to go back to normal, like, and miss the birds singing and not do something about it, especially now that we must, because also this is completely non-scientific. I have another reason why I think we're doing so well in California is that because we're the first state to curb emissions. Our renewable energy is the biggest in the country. We really take care of our nature. Not enough, but we're doing pretty well. But for a very populated area, a very populated state, we're doing well because of that. And of course, there's all the other things. We're not smoking here. We're healthier. There's all these other things, and we have leadership. So I think that's part of it. I think nature and having better air, because scientifically, they're actually finding areas with more pollution are much more susceptible to this virus. So when we build the future cities, when we bring that in, states of flows are about not only trying to get into it, but having your surrounding as part of it. And Burning Man, because it's over sensory space, you actually get into those states of flow much faster. Same thing as nature. I mean, if you go out and meditate in nature, you're focused. Try it at home, just doesn't feel the same. Same thing at Burning Man with all the noise. Best meditations I've had was out there in the playa. It's nature, it's kind of the womb energy of the playa. So yeah, I think, how do we bring that in more into the city? And now is definitely the time.
Johnny, you had a question about the regenerative narrative model on Maya's site.
Yeah.
Yeah, on your site, the kind of the flower of life type wheel that you have strikes me as a bit interesting. It's some similarities to Bill Plotkin's work with some archetypical paths and things that we're actually planning to base the park off of. I'm wondering, do you have any more writings about this and any, or just can give us a high level of what you, because it says it's copyrighted by you. Did you design that?
Yeah. Is that the Regenerative Entrepreneur or the Collective Journey? Or there's a few others.
It doesn't say the gift to the world, the collective, and it has explorer, creator, trickster, sage, lover, steward, champion, alchemist.
So that's a collective journey model. So yeah, I do have, like, I have more writing, either on my website, you can see the Regenerative Narrative Medium. There's a lot of, there's a lot of articles there. MayaZuckerman.com also has many other publications with my work. And yeah, it's a lot of those models. That model I've also extrapolated to how you run companies. And with my work with Lumen, I kind of have the missing links of everything else that we're doing. So we've got a kind of a more cohesive, a little bit more their version, because I've been working on this for a few more years, and this is my version. But there's a lot of just alignment. So yeah, and also happy to talk more with you on different models and thinking through. It's definitely not something for 1 minute. It's definitely a deeper conversation.
Totally.
Does anyone have any final questions? Yeah,
maybe that could be something for a workshop or a breakout session one day to do that exercise.
Happy to, very much happy.
That'd be awesome. Thank
you. And happy to do a deeper dive on any topic. And it's because I've been doing so much work from home for years, and now, yeah, I mean, for me, it's second nature to do that. So pretty happy to.
No pun intended. Well, last thing, if you wouldn't mind sharing, could you describe how your the inspiration behind choosing your background and how that relates to your values, and how this is a representation of the vision you see?
Yeah, so through actually some deep esoteric work, and also through just being a child, like places like this have been something in the place that I long to be and long to bring us to. And when I was looking for images for Topia, especially because I hired some artists, but I wanted to hire an artist to actually create a full comic book. And I was trying to define what it would look like. So I would go and look and, put in Google, green, futuristic, awesome cities, renewable, regenerative, green, future cities. And this one came up. I need to find out, I don't remember his name exactly. He's a Ukrainian, I think, artist. And by the way, it's not 100% his. I actually superimposed a geodesic dome on top of it. And a lot of my presentations start with this image and a quote from Buckminster Fuller. And the quote is, we get to become the architects of the new future, not its victims. So that really is an empowerment, and that's very democratic. That is, it's on me to actually create that future. This is the unless kind of personal responsibility and civic responsibility to work for a better future for all of us. This, I've only put this on in the last month, even though I've been working on Zoom for years now and video. And people, when they look at they're like, where are you? I get to say, I'm from the future.